So essentially, when we come to verse 2, and we see that they made him a supper there in Simon the leper's house. Martha was serving, but Lazarus was one of those reclining at the table with him. So Martha is, as we may know from her other account of her, which is in Luke chapter 10. We have that famous story. It's Luke 10:38 through 42, and I won't take time to read it, but you can read it to get the character of these two ladies. It's one where they have Jesus over for dinner earlier in his ministry, and it says Martha was distracted in verse 40 with all her preparations, and she said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do the serving alone?" And if you're not familiar with the story, go ahead and read it. It's Luke chapter 10:38 through 42, and you can get a sense of these two ladies. And now this is later. So we can still see that Martha has this heart for service. And she's not distracted about what somebody else is doing. She is serving into her giftedness. And friends, I think we have to always remember that the church needs people of varied gifts. We need Marthas. We need people who have a heart for service, who are just going to see the need and jump in feet first and start serving. And that's what gives them life. But we also need people like Mary, who are going to call all of our hearts back to worship. And it doesn't mean that Mary didn't get in there and serve as well, but her giftedness was calling attention to Jesus and calling attention to who he was, and drawing all of our attention to the important moment of the fact that he was there with them, and what the real reason was, and then honoring him and worshiping him in that way. That was her giftedness. And Martha's was serving and making the preparations and making sure everybody had what they needed. And we need both. And we also have to realize that, and I'm guilty of this too, even though my giftedness, I believe God has called me to do what I'm doing right now. But I also know that I don't always get the opportunity. I'm not a pastor. So I do this on this channel, and then I lead a men's group on Wednesday mornings at our church. But the rest of the week, what am I to do? I'm to serve my family, and that's not necessarily in teaching God's word. So I have to serve outside my giftedness, but also notice that I'm serving in my giftedness, and that's a healthy church. I think a healthy church is people who are serving in their giftedness, but also willing to cross those lines and do that. And I need to learn that as much as the next person. So that's the scene. We're at Simon the leper's house, but I believe that the hosts of the supper are Martha and her sister and Lazarus. And the reason that they're together is probably to celebrate Jesus and what he's done. So they made him a supper there. Martha was serving, and Lazarus was reclining at the table. And when they say reclining, and we'll see more of this when we get into the Last Supper account, is that these suppers that they were having, they weren't sitting at a table like I'm sitting at, that is what we call counter height or typical dinner table, Western dinner table. This would have been a lower table, probably a triclinium they called it, which would have been a U-shaped table where the men would lean on an elbow, on cushions on an elbow, and their feet would be out behind them. And then since it was U-shaped, the servers could come into the middle of the group and place the food and the drink from the middle, rather than reaching over and through people and tripping over legs and that sort of thing. So we have Jesus is there. He'll be leaning on his probably his left elbow, and then serving himself from the table, and with his feet out behind him. That's the picture we want to have. So Lazarus was one of those that were reclining with him. And maybe, interesting, I just thought of this, maybe there was only enough room for so many people at this seating, and maybe Judas was asked to give his seat up for Lazarus. Maybe that could have been an issue that caused Judas to get really annoyed with this situation. But verse 3, Mary then, so in the midst of this, of what's going on here, Mary then took a pound of very costly perfume of pure nard and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. So let's talk about this. I mean, this is what's been described in many of the commentaries, an over-the-top act of worship, something that would have been for her completely unself-conscious, because she would have let down her hair, which a woman in this society would not have done. Only her husband would have been able to see her hair down in the privacy of their own home. The perfume itself, as Judas will tell us in a moment, was extremely expensive. Nard was a plant that grew in the area of, I believe, was northern India, and so it would have been taken and then processed into this very expensive essential oil perfume concoction. And I also read somewhere that these expensive perfumes would have been like investment heirlooms. You know, today we hear sometimes of people investing in art or holding physical gold, for example, rather than putting it, in the stock market or something. You'd have a physical asset. Well, this would be this type of thing, that they would buy this expensive piece of art or this today, but back then they would buy this bottle of expensive perfume, and it would be saved as an heirloom or as an investment, or maybe even it was her dowry. And she was giving something that was just really expensive. And Judas is going to tell us, why was this not sold for 300 denarii? And that was equivalent to a day laborer's wages for a year. So if we want to say, I don't know what the going rate for labor is, but I think now it's got to be anywhere between, say, $30,000 and $50,000 a year. So that's what a year's wages would be equivalent today. So if we took with inflation and kind of made that equivalent today, so we're talking about something that's very, very, very expensive and very costly. And I was talking to my wife about this. I said, what would we give, to show our devotion to Jesus? And I was thinking about, it's not only showing her devotion, but it's also in gratitude. She has received her brother back from the dead. Jesus gave her brother, probably one of the most precious people in her life. One of the most precious aspects of her life is her family, and to receive back her precious brother from the dead. This, in comparison, this bottle of perfume worth a year's wages is nothing compared to that. And she's just showing her, not only her worship, but her gratitude, I think, to Jesus for that. So again, Mary then took the pound of very costly perfume of pure nard and anointed the feet of Jesus. And we talked about, we think it was down to the feet. She anointed him completely down to the feet. So she probably poured some on his head and probably poured some on his feet, and then wiped his feet with her hair. And John records this memory that again, an eyewitness memory, the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. It's probably something that was still in his memory. One of the most powerful memory triggers is scent. And one of the things that will do it for me is my grandmother, my Italian grandmother, used to make us a dish, a family dish, which was a chicken stew served over polenta with sauerkraut. They were northern Italian, just across the mountains from Austria and Germany. And I can make that dish. Thankfully, the recipe's been preserved. And when I make that dish, it takes me back to my grandmother's kitchen. and in a powerful way. And the same thing here. John can remember that scent as if it was yesterday. You can just, in his writing, you can sense that. And so then Mary, as if she's a slave, even though she's not a slave, she humbles herself to the point of wiping Jesus' feet, or washing his feet and wiping them with her hair, which is parallels to what Jesus is going to do to his disciples in chapter 13, which we'll get to. It's just an interesting parallel there. Mary is the picture that of the worshiper we want to be, and then Jesus is going to drive home that example with his disciples, and showing that that a true leader in his church is going to be a servant. Verse 4. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, who was intending to betray him, was already in his heart, said, "Why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and given to poor people?" And again, back in Mark, it says, "But some were indignantly remarking to one another, 'Why was this perfume not been wasted? It might have been sold for over 300 denarii and money given to the poor.' And they were scolding her." But John identifies as Judas as being the center of that. And it's not to say that there might not have been other disciples who were like, "Well, yeah, that sounds, why wasn't it?" But Judas was the instigator. And then John also gives us the motive for Judas saying this, his heart motive. Verse 6, "Now he said this, not because he was concerned about the poor, but because he was a thief. And he had the money box. He was entrusted with the money box, and he used to pilfer out what was put into it. So he would take from it for himself. So you could say he if they got donations of 100 denarii, 95 would make it in the box, that sort of thing, or whatever. And why would Jesus, who knew all things, trust him with that? Well, I think one commentary pointed out, and I think they hit the nail on the head, is that Jesus would allow somebody to demonstrate to themselves the condition of their hearts. So he would give him that responsibility, so that he himself could see the status of his heart. And I'm sure he did. He could see that Judas would have no excuse before God, because he would be guilty, as we all are. Verse 7, "Therefore Jesus said, 'Let her alone, so that she may keep it for the day of my burial.'" And that kind of parallels to what Mark reports, and says, "She has done what she could. She has anointed my body beforehand for the burial." And so he honors he doesn't criticize her. He honors what she has done. And of course, the highest praise is given here in Mark, where it says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, wherever the gospel is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be spoken of in memory of her." What a great and glorious honor that Jesus bestowed on Mary at that moment. And then, even though Judas was not concerned about the poor, the other people who may have had similar thoughts may have been absolutely concerned about the poor. I don't doubt it. So Jesus does address that concern. In verse 8, he says, "For the poor you always have with you, but you do not always have me." And what's Jesus saying here? I think some people can misconstrue or misuse this verse. Jesus is not saying the poor are unimportant, or that you shouldn't be concerned for the poor. What he's saying is that since the poor will always be with you in this life, in this age, since you always have the poor, you will always have the opportunity and the necessity and the privilege of meeting their needs as the church, as my people. I have a heart for the poor, and you will always have that opportunity. But this specific time will not be repeated. You don't always have me. You have me now. You will have that opportunity for the rest of time until I return to serve the poor. But you will not always have the opportunity to serve me. And that is important. For you always have the poor with you. You do not always have me. And he says the same thing in both Matthew and Mark. Verse 9, John continues. So that's the situation. Then the large crowd of Jews then learned that he was there, and they came, not for Jesus' sake only. So the multitudes, again, are returning. Not for Jesus' sake only, but they might also see Lazarus, whom he raised from the dead. So we have not only people maybe who are genuinely interested in seeking Jesus and wanting to be part of what he was doing, and who trusted in him, believed in him, but you also had curiosity seekers who wanted to go and see this for themselves, this man that was raised from the dead, this decaying corpse that was raised from the dead. And how does John put a finish on this account? He says, but the chief priests planned to put Lazarus to death also, because on account of him, many of the Jews were going away and were believing in Jesus. So not only was it enough that they were going to put Jesus to death, but we're also going to put Lazarus to death. And I'm surprised also that it didn't occur to them to go and gouge out the eyes of the blind man. Jesus said he had healed the man born blind, given him new eyes, essentially. I'm surprised it didn't occur to them to re-blind him. I mean, these men were just horrific individuals. But anyway, so friends, what do you think of Mary and Martha and this story and Judas? Do you see yourself in any of these individuals? I think we all have some of them in each one of us. None of us are perfect, and all of us sometimes are focused on the wrong things. But I hope that in Mary and Martha, you see a picture of your place in the kingdom of God and in your church. That if you're more like Martha or more like Mary, knowing that Jesus can use you where you are to serve, both serve and to worship Him. And I hope you found that account useful and helpful. So friends, if you appreciate this kind of content on YouTube, I'd appreciate it if you do me the great favor of clicking that like button and subscribing to the channel, because that really does let me know that people are receiving this, and it is bearing fruit and benefiting someone, and also lets YouTube know that more people would be interested in this content, and they will push it out to more people. So next time we'll continue in John chapter 12, and as we again continue in this last week of Jesus's life, this from chapter 12 to chapter 21 will be spent in these last 7 days as we see the death and the resurrection of the Son of God are the central event of human history. So thanks for being with me, and I look forward to seeing you then on Understanding Your Bible. Thanks, friends.